Okay, now we're recording. So, welcome back, people who are watching this video, number 10 in our series. And today we're actually going to be talking about the infrastructure reform proposal put out by Joe Biden some time ago. Actually, we talked about it in relation to the COVID relief bill, which functioned as immediate, though temporary, um, financial economic relief for people affected by the pandemic. So that was just to sort of keep people their heads above water. And then sort of a companion piece to this was the infrastructure reform, or the American Jobs Plan, I think is what it's officially called, which is more of a long-term, very comprehensive proposal, or maybe two proposals, to yeah, improve the American economy, get the American economy going again, something that will benefit the American economy after the immediate effects of the COVID pandemic. So there hasn't been a lot of discussion about this because other things have been going on, and we focused on other things. But now it's time to return to it, because it is a very important piece of potential legislation. Um, and so what we're going to do, first of all, ask Anders to give an overview of what the infrastructure reform bill is and why it's important. Then we'll look at some of the different parts of it, and also look at where it is in Congress, because like any proposal, it has to be passed by Congress. And we'll look at the House, and we'll look at the Senate, and also look at how this fits in with Biden's reputation as allegedly being the most transformational president in the history of the world, being ironic. But he likes to compare himself, other people like to compare him to FDR and other people. I'm not sure if that's valid. Also, I thought what we would do at the end of the video, since we are now nearing, or maybe actually on, the 100th day of the Biden administration, which is a key marker when you look at what a new president has done. I thought Anders and I will give our opinions. We haven't prepared this at all. Of what we think of Biden now at the 100th day, and I'm still working in my mind what I want to say about that. But the really important thing is to talk about infrastructure. It is a very important bill. So Anders, tell us what is this bill, and why is it important, and why is it being presented now?
Okay, well, thanks for the surprise discussion subject.
So we
That's
might
gonna be
agree or
interesting.
disagree. I have
Yeah.
difficulty agreeing with myself about Biden, but and that's why I
Yeah,
still have my settle for Biden, but I don't really believe it. I don't know. Oh.
Joe Biden is a land of contrasts, as they say. Let's start with this
Yeah.
bill,
Mm,
first of all, and I mean, it's a $2 trillion stimulus bill, basically, which is also meant to like expressly meant to steer the country towards like greener industry and transportation and stuff like that. And it also contains a bunch of provisions for helping labor, interestingly.
mhm, right,
And we'll get back to the price tag later,
right,
$2 trillion, because
exactly.
I kind of want to put that into some sort of context.
Right,
But let's start with what's actually contained in this thing.
right.
It's divided into four parts. One is $621 billion for infrastructure, like traditional infrastructure,
Maybe
trains,
you could
planes,
explain what do
automobiles.
we mean by infrastructure? I'm not sure if everybody,
Well,
what is usually included in what is infrastructure? Yeah.
that's one of the weird parts about this bill. It
Mm,
includes lots of things that I don't think most people would consider infrastructure.
no.
But the purely infrastructural part of it is like generally infrastructure means uh, lines of communication, distribution, um, and like buildings,
So things
stuff,
like roads and
roads,
airports, railroad, bridges,
yeah, water lines,
uh, right?
ports,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Tangible property, one could say.
Yeah,
Mm, mm,
that's good
oh,
way of putting it.
mm,
And anyway, the first part of the bill is $621 billion. A lot of that, like the largest chunk, more than 170 billion, is going to go towards electrifying roads and subsidies for electric cars
right.
and replacing uh, vehicles used by the federal government, buying electric vehicles for like the postal service and stuff like that,
Hmm.
which is good, I guess. But at the same time, probably I personally would be happier if they spent more trying to get away from cars instead of just
Oh, yeah.
replacing.
You mean cars altogether?
Yeah, because when looking at the concrete figures of this, like, modernizing public transit
Mm,
and expanding railroads and uh, repairing the Amtrak backlog and stuff like
yeah.
that, like public transit and those
Okay.
kinds of things. Uh, that receives slightly less money
True.
than Biden is planning to spend
Mhm.
on just electric
Oh, yeah.
cars and stuff like that. And
Mm,
like, I would have preferred, and actually I would have
okay.
expected, considering
Oh,
there's
yeah.
quite a lot of public support for
Right.
like high-speed rail and stuff like that.
Right.
The money going to towards rail traffic and stuff like that isn't
True.
especially impressive. It's 80 million for
Yeah.
the railroad and uh, another 85 billion for
Yeah.
modernizing public transit,
Right.
which means like buses and stuff, I guess.
Yeah. That's a very interesting point. In fact, if I think about it, there hasn't been that much or very little or non-existent discussion about this aspect in the American media. And I think especially, living in Europe where we have a different discussion about high-speed railroads and all that, and this is sort of old hat, or if you're in Japan, it's even more ancient. But that hasn't really figured in the debate in America. But it's a very good point. If you're going to transition to a green economy, then these are very important things. I know periodically, I know these have come up in like Arizona, where I used to visit a lot, uh, uh, California, and I know when somebody establishes one subway line or a transit line, it's like. I mean, Phoenix went through, I forget how much it cost to have, maybe it's more comprehensive now, but it was one little line. People were like, whoa. But it's difficult to convey maybe to a European audience just how, I mean, how enormously car dependent America is. And of course, one sees this if you look at Los Angeles and so forth. But that's a very good point, and one would expected more discussion about that. And yeah, why not focus more on that? It's not going to cost you any political capital. And I think many people would be, and especially a younger generation, would be enormously supportive of this
Yeah,
because we know younger
absolutely.
people choose away from cars and want to live in urban areas because of transportation costs and so forth. Yeah, go ahead.
No, absolutely. Among younger voters, I think
Right.
there's
Very
probably
good.
support for like tripling or quadrupling the
Oh,
amount going towards railways. Like, I've heard a lot of discussions online about
okay.
rail traffic in the US, and out of curiosity, earlier today I started googling train tickets in,
Okay.
in the US, and they're fairly affordable. But the problem is, if you want to go from, like, say you want to go coast to coast
Um,
in the US, the average time a train takes to make it across the continent is slightly under 80 hours. It's almost 4 days. And that's roughly double the time it takes to drive from coast to
it was
coast.
okay in pioneer days, but now it's not
Yeah,
really, really
uh,
acceptable.
and especially when you consider that if you build high-speed rail, you can
Mm.
make the same trip in under a day.
Oh,
If you want to get away from airplanes and
oh,
people having to drive across country, just build more railroad. Trains are
oh,
good. They're cheap, environmentally friendly, and
oh,
uh, you can easily make them affordable
oh.
just by subsidizing train tickets.
Mm.
Uh,
Good.
it's if you want to actually transition towards a green economy, that's I think it's a missed opportunity in this bill.
Yeah.
But going on here,
Yeah.
another 115 billion goes towards modernizing bridges, roads, and so on and so on. 115 billion to car traffic, and sure, it's kind of unfair to compare that to the 80 billion that Amtrak gets, considering most of this is going to be spent in places where it's not really feasible to switch car traffic out for trains, like urban centers and
Okay.
like really rural areas that have like really bad roads, haven't seen repair in a long time. There's a bunch of other bits and pieces here, like 25 billion for airports, 50 billion for infrastructure resiliency to prevent like flooding and stuff like that, I guess. 25 billion towards miscellaneous projects, which is kind of some kind of grab bag of,
Things.
I don't want to say grift, but
Oh, but pork,
it seems
the
kind of,
American term is pork barrel.
yeah.
When you have these things that are just put in there, and then you can, they might be for special purposes in Louisiana or somewhere else, or whatever. Yeah, they're miscellaneous.
Then we have like a bunch of money going towards housing and stuff
Mm.
connected to housing, like private, private, not private, but infrastructure more aimed at persons in their homes.
Mm.
Uh, just over 200 billions to retrofit 2 million homes
Mm.
to make decent, affordable houses available to people.
Yeah.
And 2 million homes, that's not a lot in a country of
If you
350 million people.
exactly, if you think about
It's,
uh, the
I
size of
think,
America. But this also
yeah,
has an environmental aspect as well, doesn't it? At least that's the way I interpret it. There would be insulating homes. And having
yeah,
grown up in northeastern Ohio and what was not exactly a high income area, um, yeah, I mean, so the building, and again, everybody lives in a house instead of an apartment. Apartments were really expensive if you wanted to live in an apartment in town in Cleveland. But there's a great need there, and then we're not even talking about places in places in Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, the backwaters. I mean, there's such an enormous need for. I mean, it's not. Some of it can't even be called proper housing. I don't know if that money would be going first of all to them or not, but obviously there's a much greater need this actually accomplishes. But it sounds nice.
Yeah, it sounds nice, and I think it's targeted, and it's targeted towards the poor neighborhoods,
Oh,
which is good, I
okay.
guess.
Yeah.
It's supposed to go to neighborhoods that where the need is greatest.
Okay.
At the same time, 2 million houses, that's like
Yeah, it's
20 million would have been nicer,
oh,
if you ask me.
exactly. Mhm.
And another 100 billion towards water infrastructure. It's supposed to replace all the lead pipes
Yeah.
in America. Um, I kind of have questions about this because
Okay.
usually the pipes inside private residences are the responsibility of the homeowner, and I wonder if this actually covers those, like the laterals from the water main to the tap. If it doesn't, then this is
Probably
also,
not.
I mean, it's a step in the right direction, but it's
Yeah.
insufficient. Because, like, if we're assuming you live in, for example, Flint, Michigan,
Oh, oh,
and you live in a rental property, then it's
right,
probably still going to be up to your landlord to
right,
replace the piping inside of the
right.
house. Um, I've looked around, but I haven't been able to to figure out whether this actually covers pipes all the way from the water plant to the faucet. I mean, if it
Wow.
doesn't, then it's not wasted money, but it's definitely insufficient.
Right.
But I'm gonna withhold judgment on that because, like I said, I haven't nobody's written anything about that
No.
specific detail.
What we might emphasize all these things. I mean, there you have the proposal, but it's without giving away any surprise endings. But it's in the House now. It's all very it's very much in its formative stage, even within the House. And the House most likely is going to pass it, but all the details are definitely not known. But it's a very important point about the lead pipes because I hadn't thought of that. But I'm assuming that is for the the local government, the pipes that lead up to the house, which would means that they're not in the house, although it should include that as well. And there would be nothing to prevent them from including that. Because here again, I think, especially in Sweden, you talk about this, oh, replace some lead pipes, you can do that in a few days. But how antiquated and how dangerous the system is in America. In Flint, Michigan, the enormous scandal there, people dying, and I mean, it's an enormous political scandal and everything else because of the water going through these lead pipes and local government not replacing them. So this is an enormous. This is a life and death issue for, again, people in poor communities. And I can only not even surmise how widespread this problem is throughout the United States. And it shows how out of date the whole American infrastructure is. Again, compared to Sweden, country we're living in, that I mean, it just wouldn't be acceptable if somebody did these things. I think one way to look at this project is really as one, or the infrastructure bill is an enormous attempt to actually modernize the United States. We think about America as being, the most modern country in the world and all this, and yeah, it has Coca-Cola and everything else and consumer culture. But when you look at what the economy is actually based on or dependent on, that the whole thing is just totally, totally in need of massive investment. And this has been nothing really happened during Clinton or Obama, and then Trump. I mean, he moved things backwards. But in order to keep the American economy going, and I think Biden or at least his advisors realize this, we have to have an enormous thing like in the 1930s or Reconstruction after the Civil War. We have to really build the entire foundation of American industry, and the Republican Party doesn't get this. But yeah, just the thing about lead pipes and how prevalent they are and how dangerous.
Yeah, the lead pipe thing is especially shocking. That's,
Oh,
I mean, it has the feel of like a 19th century
oh,
problem.
exactly. Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy, and it's it's shocking. It's so bad that Obama felt he had to drink a glass of polluted water on live television.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
And
Was that
the
when he
problem
was
is
campaigning? When he was
uh,
campaigning, or when was?
no, I think it's just some kind of effort to make it seem like he was on top of the problem and trying
Okay.
to get it fixed.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I don't remember the details. I just have like the visual clear in my head of Obama taking
Oh,
a
I
sip of
remember. Yeah.
Flint water. But it's like that's basically all he did as well. Like,
I just
uh,
remembered going back to jobs I had in the summer in Chagrin Falls, Ohio. I worked in a hardware store, fitting lead pipes for the plumbers who came in to. So I'm complicit. The whole basement was filled with lead piping. No, some of our biggest customers here are usually contractors, painters and plumbers, and especially plumbers. So one of the skills I learned was how to thread pipes. And I never, I didn't think, but this is not okay. It's ancient history for some, but this is the 1960s, and nobody. I'm sure all the pipes in our house were. I mean, that was what people were using. We never had any
yeah,
plastic pipes or anything.
it's kind of stupid. I mean, it's not like people
No
didn't know
idea.
lead was
No,
poisonous.
there's no discussion. It was with the scandal in Flint a few years ago.
Yeah.
Oh boy, yeah. So a lot of money could be put into
Yeah, exactly. And it's $111 billion. It's supposed to be, and only 45 billion are gonna be used to replace lead pipes. I don't know if it's gonna cover it like completely. There's a lot of pipes in America, and digging stuff up and replacing it is quite expensive. But anyway, it's a step in the right direction. Just I worry about the details.
Mhm.
Uh, there's a couple of other $100 billion investments. 100 billion to improve the electric grid, which is a
Right.
really good idea.
Yes.
And considering what recently happened in
Texas.
Texas,
Exactly.
another 100 billion to expand broadband coverage and give the stated goal is to give every American access to a high-speed internet connection,
Mm.
which is really good because that's something you absolutely need uh,
Yeah.
in today's society, and nobody should go without just because they happen to like live in the wrong place. 100 billion to build and upgrade public schools. That's good.
Mhm.
Um, and then a bunch of like smaller stuff. Uh, 40 billion for public housing projects, and like I read the official statement from the White House, and I'm still not quite sure what exactly they're planning to do with these 40
Uh-huh.
billion. I mean, it's not a lot of money. I guess
No.
they're like put up some buildings and stuff, but that's also like you could probably spend 10 times as much,
Uh-huh.
no problem on that without like denting the problem. Um, and uh, now we're getting to the best part of the bill, if you're asking me at least. A massive $400 billion going towards better salaries. Excuse me,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
losing my voice here.
Mhm.
Better salaries and working conditions for caregivers,
Mhm.
people taking care of elderly people. This is the one part of the proposal that I'm actually quite thrilled about, because the official statement from the White House specifically talks about improving working conditions and wages for a group of people who have been historically like treated quite badly and haven't gotten their fair share.
Oh.
And this is the kind of thing that I would have expected them to spend like $20 billion on, but it's a whopping 400 billion, which is super nice.
It is a lot, unexpectedly, and that's also an issue, which is one of these things that one could actually relate to here in Sweden, although the scale is, of course, much smaller, a smaller population. But it's we've and especially seen in the pandemic, and that must have influenced this number as well. That pretty shocking, the state of care for the elderly and so forth. And then, everybody knew, I mean, for years and years and years, that these people are underappreciated and above all underpaid. So this is an attempt to rectify that. But it's not really infrastructure, is it? Putting on my
No, not really.
Republican hat, it's not. It's these are not bridges. These are not roads.
No, it's I I agree with you. It's hard to
I mean, I'm
like,
just being a devil's advocate. I think it's great to,
yeah,
you
it's definitely hard to call this infrastructure with a straight
know,
face, but
it's human. It's
we can,
called human infrastructure. That's the term
yeah.
that's being used now.
Uh, I, to be honest, I don't care what we call it.
Exactly.
It's a good thing, and like I said, it's really encouraging that they actually like call out labor rights by
Yeah.
name in this like official statement
Right.
where they're presenting the proposal.
Mm.
It's encouraging. It's I'm really happy to see it, because I completely agree with the Biden administration on this point. Like it's the people who work in elderly care are like of all the people who actually have jobs in society, nobody's treated quite as badly as they
Oh.
are.
Mm.
So it's been a long time coming, and it's well past due, if you ask
Mm.
me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, sorry.
Oh no, I just think I think I like it too, and I like the comprehensive. I wish more. Again, it's just is being mangled in the House, and will be that's the way legislation goes. But I wish there had been more. I wish the Biden administration or Biden himself had presented this and showing this is a comprehensive. Just say, okay, here's our situation in America today. Here's a comprehensive. This is what we need to do, and this is a comprehensive plan, and it's going to contain traditional infrastructure things like roads and bridges and so forth, but it's also going to contain ways of improving America, making American society stronger and more viable and being able to compete economically. Because let's face it, people, we're lagging behind the rest of the world. It's a comprehensive program, and every part of this is essential. And with a special message for the Republicans, don't you dare vote against, don't you dare even argue against this. But this is what I wish there should have been, that approach, and I think this would have enthused people, as you mentioned, and I mean there's public support for all these things, so it's not like you have to convince the people that, oh, we're going to spend money on housing or replacing lead pipes or making better roads. The people are for this, and if it's a billion or 100 billion or something, they're not going to argue with that. But you have to, I would say, attack, go on the offensive against your political opponents. And but I don't see that happening. And then we talked about this. We've seen this regarding the $15 minimum wage and everything else. But why not? Because my fear is that all these different, there's a long, long list as you've read out, and there's other things as well included in this, that these become discrete items in a plan of some sort. And then when it gets into Congress and strange things happen there, it'll be picked apart, and each thing will be used as a bargaining tool.
Yeah,
And within the Democratic Party as well, because there's conservative members there, and also in the House. I mean, before you say, "Oh, yeah, it's going to pass the House," I'm not terribly optimistic. It's still too early to say anything, but there are voices in the House, and I think they're gaining traction from people in the Senate, like Joe Manchin, who said, "I don't care what the party says. This is what I want." But they're used to, okay, 100 billion. No, no, we'll give you 25, but I want this, and then what's going to emerge. And this happens to all legislation, of course, but this is
yeah,
such an enormous piece of legislation that I think there's a danger of just being picked apart. And I want a president to go out there and say, no, none of this is negotiable. Of course, you can, but you use that as your starting point to say it's all essential, and it is all essential. And as
yeah.
you said, on a number of these things, you could spend much more and make real improvement, because that's one of the main criticisms from progressives and also ourselves, that it doesn't really spend enough. It's a start, but really, if you look at the enormity of the problem.
Yeah, maybe we should actually get to
Oh,
the price tag discussion,
right,
because the last part of the bill is kind of boring anyway. It's a bunch of different investments in research and development and subsidies for like manufacturing and stuff like
right,
that. And it's all kind of technical and vague, and it's um, it's basically money for um, domestic manufacturing to stimulate American businesses.
oh,
And it's a long list of stuff that's too boring to plow through here. So
okay,
let's
yeah,
get to the political discussion
do that.
instead.
Mm,
Like, first of all, I think the 400 billion going to caregivers, they should play up that. Like that's the smart political play,
oh,
if you ask me, is make that one of the centerpieces of the legislation. Rename the entire bill to like the Protecting American Elderly Lives and
good.
Infrastructure Act or something.
Oh,
And then make a major point of 20% of the money on this thing going towards the elderly care, because old people vote, and old people
oh,
overwhelmingly vote Republican.
oh,
So I mean,
good
if you're
point.
actually trying to like
Oh,
make a smart political play,
smart,
then maybe
good.
you want to make a bigger thing out of
Oh,
spending 400 billion
oh,
on elderly care.
oh,
Uh, but also generally, when talking about like whether this is going to pass the house or not, like the whole thing isn't going to pass the house in the condition uh,
yeah, that
it
isn't good.
arrived at.
No.
So why start at $2 trillion? Why not 10 trillion
But it's
and
so
walk away
much.
with five?
We can't afford it. And everybody, all the reports in America and also in Sweden, irritate me, say this is the most transformational thing, and since sliced bread, or whatever, artificial cheese in America or something like that, or it's not real butter. I mean, it's changed everything. This is enormous sums. Nobody's done anything like this before. And then you have people like AOC, Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, saying, no, it should be 4 times as much, 40 billion and all this. I mean, isn't that too much?
I mean,
No, it's not.
I
It's not, because, and also I think there's a misunderstanding here. Maybe not in America, but certainly here. And when I heard the first thing was the $2 trillion, I think, gee, that's a lot of money. And I thought it was for 1 year. But even for 1 year, actually, compared to the COVID relief, or not to mention the tax giveaways that the Trump and the Bush administrations have given, which are even bigger. But I thought it was for 1 year, and then I found out it was for 8 years or 10 years or something. Then suddenly that seemingly large number, and all these sums are astronomical for any ordinary person. But suddenly that's not, and all these sums you mentioned, if you drag them over 8, 10 years, I mean,
Exactly. Like
what's left?
these sums are astronomical, and there's no way, like as an ordinary person, if you're not like a trained economist,
Hmm.
there's no way to like really visualize or get your head
No,
around
no,
2 trillion or 10 trillion.
no.
And also, once again, I appreciate you playing devil's advocate here, but
Actually, I'm a Republican. No,
yeah,
that's another
no,
part of my
but
past. Oh, no.
whether you start at 2 trillion or 10 trillion
Oh,
or 20 trillion or 500 billion, the Republican response is going to be the same. It's going to be, this is
it
too much.
doesn't matter.
Uh, and this is one of the problems I had with Obama
Oh,
during his entire presidency was
oh,
he basically started every negotiation from a compromised
right,
position.
right.
And this is the kind of the worst part, the worst thing about this proposed bill. Uh, it didn't start out forcefully and aggressively enough. They
Right.
should have started at like 10 trillion over
Oh,
10 years,
oh,
or at least like make it 7 trillion uh,
oh,
over 10 years. That's the same amount of money that you spend on defense. Like just to put it in
oh,
perspective,
oh, yeah, yeah, exactly.
uh,
Oh,
the Department of Defense budget every year is around 700 billion,
oh,
so $0.7 trillion.
and
Uh,
15% of the American budget.
yeah, and uh, if you look at like specific weapons programs, I told you like a couple of days ago, I fell into the F-35 rabbit hole. I spent a couple of hours reading about the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program,
Uh-huh.
and the price tag for that, like the estimated lifetime price of that project, is up to 1.7 trillion. Uh, so 1.7 trillion for a
Right.
single airplane,
Mm,
uh, or a single airplane program, I
right.
should probably say.
Right.
Uh, if you put it in that perspective, then
Exactly.
2 trillion for infrastructure and healthcare spending and stuff like that, it doesn't seem terribly expensive anymore.
No, no. Those
And
are the sort of comparisons that you need that need to be made, because then they become concrete. And it's
yeah,
very good that you do that. And I wish the Biden administration had done the same. Said, look, people, this is the same as one failed airplane research program. Go
yeah.
ahead.
If you tell people that you can either have this
Oh,
one new fighter airplane, or you can have clean drinking water uh, with non-leaded water for your kids. You
yeah.
can have train traffic across the
Oh,
US. You can have like electric cars, or at least infrastructure put in place,
mm,
and you can have public schools. You can have care for
oh,
like grandma, stuff
exactly.
like that.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't seem like a terribly bad deal, even
No.
if the price tag is $2 trillion.
Right.
I think.
But those are the things they should focus on. Again, not just to sell it because people are going to agree with it anyway, but to counter the Republican counter arguments, which all have to do with dollars and cents, and they even want to have tax cuts. I, I mean, so plant trees and make tax cuts. Yeah, that's going to solve a lot of problems. I mean, it's good to plant trees, but I mean, one needs to counter their argument because I think that now. Okay, Trump is gone, but the arguments still seem to be winning, and you need somebody, not people, obviously people like AOC and others and Bernie Sanders. They counter these arguments. That's what I liked about Bernie Sanders and the campaign. You could destroy them, whereas most Democrats, establishment Democrats, well, you know, but the Republicans managed to keep this the debate about this and other issues just on dollars and cents. and then you're really losing perspective of what the whole thing is about. And anyway, they're in bad faith anyway because they're not interested in the dollars and cents. No, they say, how are you going to finance this? Well, infrastructure finances itself, but one has to move beyond that, and also you could at least ask them, how are you going to finance this tax cut? Where's the trillions coming from that we were giving away to people to buy back stock and things like that? But they never think of doing that. But you can't argue on the same, you know, misleading level because it's not about dollars and cents. It's about what
Yeah.
kind of country you want to have and uh, things like that. And then the Republicans, as they are now anyway, don't have any response to that except say tax cuts for the rich. Uh,
That's another good comparison. Like nobody can quite agree on the precise figures, but
right.
this bill over 10 years is the impact on the budget if you don't count any new revenue brought in as an effect of it. It's going to be about the same as the Bush tax cuts or the Trump tax cuts.
Mm.
Um, Same order of magnitude. Uh, and like as you say, infrastructure it usually pays for itself,
Oh,
unless it's like a really stupid project, like the
yeah.
bridge to nowhere and stuff like that.
That's
Uh,
that's what happens in Italy, and that's because of the mafia. I remember that there are
yeah,
actually bridges that go nowhere, and the bridges that collapse are horrible things. But no, but I remember also in Obama. I mean, the conversation has certainly changed, and what people want has changed, because Obama made some very very cautious baby steps towards subsidizing some green energy companies and so forth. It was just like $1.98 or something. It wasn't, but I remember the attacks on that was like, this is un-American and horrible. And they managed to find, I forget the name of the project, but he had authorized the federal government to give X numbers of dollars to this company, and then the company failed. And this was, well, there you have it. Government and this, no, we don't want to have any subsidizing wind or electricity and stuff like that. And now the public conversation is completely different. I
yeah,
remember Obama couldn't defend himself. He just said no. What's also interesting in that context about subsidies, and again, Republicans and Democrats, Republicans say, oh, you can't subsidize wind and water and all this sort of stuff. But please continue to give oil and gas companies and fracking as many subsidies and tax breaks as possible. Uh, one of the great paradoxes of the whole climate thing, the big summit thing that Joe Biden called was, while that was being held virtually or digitally, whatever, sorry, there was a House committee investigating subsidies to the fossil fuel industries. Ro Khanna from California,
yeah,
and they actually interviewed Greta Thunberg. And when I saw the clip with Greta independently, I thought, "Yeah, Biden actually invited her to say something." And I text something to one of my sons who's very involved in this. And so I thought, well, she speaks truth to power. Yeah, good on you. And then I realized now she had been invited to speak at the hearing on these subsidies to the fossil fuel companies. And they're still going on. They've gotten, I forget the number, billions or trillion or whatever, during the pandemic to keep going.
yeah,
And they've laid off workers during that time. And somebody during he was answered by what's her name, another congressperson from California, is saying, well, we create jobs, we pay taxes. So from the oil industry or whatever, and she just totally destroyed him. But people don't well, I think they realize it now, but 10, 15 years ago, I think the consensus was, no, these companies just, they manage on their own.
yeah.
um, Standard Oil, and they don't get any money or tax breaks from the government. Whereas somebody who wants to have wind power, of course you have to give them subsidies. But now we're in a very different place in history, which I think would have been nice to take advantage of that and move more aggressively. But
Absolutely. Like at least like the best thing would just be to stop paying massive subsidies to oil and
Exactly.
gas companies.
Why not do that?
Yeah, but
Uh,
if you can't negotiate that, then at least demand that, okay, you have to match this dollar for dollar with
oh,
investments in solar and wind.
right.
Like if Standard Oil gets $100 billion, then you have to
Oh,
put the same amount into solar,
oh,
like at a very minimum.
mm,
Uh,
yeah.
it's amazing actually that oil and gas companies get
I
such
know
just massive public subsidies,
exactly.
especially today. Like, but surely that has to be going away though,
I
like
think, yeah,
sometime
we
soon.
are. I mean, people are more aware of it, more of a turning point in the various oil disasters. But they've managed to keep it secret for so long, and of course
Yeah,
they never admit it themselves. And then if you look at the money, American political parties are financed by donations, and fossil fuel industries, they support Democrats and they support Republicans. So you get a certain place where Biden's not going to say that if I'm against fracking or something like that. Oh, I got contributions from them. Well, I mean, at some point they're going to have to, especially now that one can see, not least because of Bernie Sanders, that you can run a very effective and efficient campaign on small donations. You do not need these people's money. And maybe I hope that message gets through to some establishment Democrats who maybe are on the fence which way they want to go. That no, you don't have to be beholden to big pharma and fossil fuels and so forth. You can actually run a campaign and even be elected, just appealing to the people. What a radical democratic idea! But I mean that's part of um, the breaks within the system, the obstacles, because both parties are so dependent on it. And American wealth was measured in the fossil fuel industry. But it is changing. Yeah, definitely.
yeah, and hopefully, I've seen kind of few news stories about how politicians hate making phone calls to donors. That's supposedly one of the worst parts of being an elected official in the
Uh-huh.
US. You have to like
Oh,
call
really?
people up and beg for money, and everyone has to do it. Like
Wow.
Ted Cruz has to sit at like a desk in a cubicle like a couple of hours every month, just calling people and begging for donations, and they all hate it. So if
Interesting.
someone can come up with a
Oh,
better way of financing
but wasn't
stuff
something like
from,
that included in something we've also forgotten about, and which probably will not get through the Senate, and that the voting, not Voting Rights Act, but the new thing to guarantee voting rights that we talked about before. I think there was something in there to, again, to take dependency away from the big donors somehow. I forget maybe it wasn't federal, what's the federal financing of election
yeah, there's
thing?
I think there's a provision about public financing.
Oh,
uh, I mean, it's when it comes to public financing, the problem is you have this Supreme Court decision
right.
saying that money is speech and corporations are persons.
Oh, free
So
speech.
it's I don't think unless you get like a new verdict from the Supreme Court, there's no way to legislate against
Yeah,
uh,
no,
donations. The best route is probably to come up with different model that actually functions,
right.
like Bernie Sanders did,
Oh,
as you say, just show people a different way
right.
that's actually like workable, and maybe people will pick up on it. And like in the long run, I have to assume that that's like a winning strategy, because if you're like a Bernie Sanders type candidate running a Bernie Sanders type campaign with
Mm,
like financed by small donors, you're never going to look as corrupt as
Oh,
someone who gets like
absurd.
$100 million from an oil company or
Oh,
something.
oh,
So like it's probably a winning strategy. It might take a couple of election cycles to perfect the recipe, but
right.
I think that's probably the way to go,
Yeah.
in my opinion. But we're kind of getting off topic. You think this this bill is gonna pass?
The
Uh,
way it looks now, I think in one form or another, I mean, this debate, there will be one bill or two bills. It'll get one way or another, it'll get through the House. Let's say it remains more or less intact. I think it'll get through the House. That's pretty much a safe bet. But then the problem is what happens in the Senate. Um, but one important, perhaps I was going to say minor, but perhaps a small victory was won regarding getting it through the Senate, because the only way to get it through the Senate with a simple majority, 51 votes in favor, is to do it through budget reconciliation, just like they did with COVID relief. Which was not all that easy, but it went through, because otherwise, and we'll have to spend more time on this on another video, you have to have 60 votes, which is totally shouldn't be part of a democratic system. And you don't get 60 votes, 60 of 100 in the Senate. So it has to go through by budget reconciliation. And even then, it's uncertain whether it will pass. But one small victory in this process was achieved when our friend, the Senate parliamentarian, who decided that $15 an hour minimum wage had nothing to do with the budget. So you couldn't include that in the budget reconciliation, the COVID relief bill. So that was taken off, and Biden said, okay, I give up. But she has decided now that, because there's a question of how many budget reconciliation bills can you have in a session, congressional session. You can't have all of them, because then you don't need 60 senators. But Schumer has argued quite effectively. He did his homework and said, no, actually, what we're doing with the American Jobs Plan is it's not really new. We're just adding on to what we had done previously, which is a bit sleight of hand, but hey, this is the way the game is played. And actually, much to my surprise, the Senate parliamentarian agreed. He says, yes, this isn't new. This is adding on to COVID. You could make an argument for that, but then you're not going to get things like free university education and research and development, things like that. But the more basic things, traditional infrastructure things, you can get through by budget reconciliation. So you won't need 60 votes, you'll need 51. But then it comes down to Joe Manchin and what he wants to do.
yeah,
Because he's already made noise. And other Democrats say, oh, we pay too much taxes in California and New York. Can't you lower our taxes? Then we'll support it. And the problem with letting Manchin have his own way is not just that he obstructs things, but he encourages other right-leaning establishment Democrats. Hey, if he can get away with it, so they say, okay, we'll support this if you lower taxes for us. In effect, as complicated as, in New York and California, we'll support maybe half of what you're saying. So what might go through in the final analysis is very difficult to say, or maybe it won't at all. And certainly a lot of the provisions, I don't see them being qualified as budget reconciliation things. Some of the more social programs, for example, you'll pay for elderly care and so forth. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, it'll go through the House, I think, but the Senate is going to be, and the thing is, it's going to take so long. The whole summer is going to be taken up dealing with this, but that's my prediction, and oh, it'll be a problem in the Senate. Yeah. What do you think?
follow-up question. Do you
Yeah.
think the parliamentarian is going to allow the PRO Act to remain a part of this bill?
No, I
Because
don't think so.
we forgot to mention this.
Yeah, yeah,
The PRO Act, the
exactly.
much vaunted by us PRO Act, is it's supposed to be passed as a part of this
Yeah, I know.
legislative effort. Do you think it's going to be taken out? before.
Well, because since I didn't
Well,
understand her reasoning the first time with $15 an hour, because it does impact. But I'm afraid she'll. But on the other hand, she could have said this time that, hey, sorry, sorry, Chuck, but you're pulling a fast one. No, this is something new. But also what he's gotten is a new budget, a third budget reconciliation a possibility in 2002. And there, I think he's thinking about the things that might not get through this time. I mean,
yeah,
we can always we can move figures around and so forth. But I think, I mean, the Republicans are so much against this PRO Act, but it's so important. But again, as you say, it's so important. Under normal circumstances, you would have this as standalone legislation. It already is, as you mentioned before. It's already passed the House. Push it to the Senate. But in order to do that, you would have to get rid of the filibuster. And in order to do that, the Democrats can do that. They can do that. And it would be very interesting in the midterms. Say they get 52 or 53 seats in the Senate. And this is not entirely unrealistic. Unfortunately, it's not unrealistic that they'll lose the House. But anyway, but in the Senate, the Democrats could introduce the working orders in the beginning of the session saying, we're getting rid of the filibuster. And they have the votes to do it. And to heck with you, Joe Manchin, because we don't need you anymore. And I would love to see that. And
oh
maybe
yeah,
Schumer's
yeah,
thinking along those lines, and then we could start moving, real legislation. So okay, maybe we can't get the PRO Act and some of these other things through now, but let's get through what we can now, and then see what happens, next time around. And maybe we won't even need budget reconciliation. But right now, the Voting Act and pro great pieces of legislation, they're definitely needed. And I hope in the midterm elections that Democrats, obviously the progressives will, but the whole Democratic Party should really hit these things. Really, the Republicans are keeping you from having this and a decent life and everything else. I don't know. What do you think?
yeah. I I'm I'm not optimistic about this passing in any
In any
recognizable
form?
form. It's a well, it's I don't think they like you say, they don't have the votes in the Senate.
No.
Uh, it's if this passes, they need if this is going to pass, they need Joe Manchin, and he's gonna butcher
Yeah.
this entire bill. Um, and like he's already started like fighting and bickering about the financing of this thing.
Right.
It's supposed to be financed by raising corporate taxes
Mm.
to slightly under what they were when Donald Trump came into office. 28%
Mm.
on corporate earnings, and Joe Manchin has like protested and said that no, 25.
Yeah.
That's the best I can do. So, I mean, it's if he's already
Yeah.
like basically signaling that this is a no-go,
Mm.
I can't be optimistic about this.
No.
On the other hand, I think that like this is it's fairly easy to sell to people, I think.
Yes.
And when I read the official statement about this from the White House, two things became fairly clear. First of all, they mentioned China and competition with
Oh
China
yeah.
a
Oh
couple
yeah.
of times
Oh yeah.
in the text, or a bunch of times actually.
Oh yeah.
Like the third sentence
Uh-huh.
states that this is all
Okay.
about making sure we can compete with
Compete with
China.
China. Yeah.
So they're low key trying to sell this as like a nationalist
Oh.
defense kind of thing. And
Oh.
also, there's a lot of talk about labor rights and the right to organize and the
Okay.
rights of working people and
Really?
stuff like that in
Okay.
the presentation. And I think that probably signals like some kind of intention from Joe Biden to actually fight for the labor rights parts of
Right.
this
Okay.
legislation.
Oh,
legislation. I think that's probably why there's like 400 billion going towards
oh,
elderly care workers
oh
and
yeah,
stuff like that.
oh yeah.
And I think he's probably going to fight for the Pro Act in a way he wasn't prepared to do for
Okay,
$15 an hour.
okay.
Like the reason the parliamentarian could just take out the $15 an hour minimum wage um, was that Joe Biden basically
Uh,
signaled beforehand that he didn't want it, he wasn't
right.
going to fight for it.
No.
Uh, he came out and said that, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not going to pass. The parliamentarian is going to take it out, and then it happened.
Okay.
This time, I think the intention is quite clear. He's prepared
Okay.
to actually fight for this,
Mhm.
uh, and I'm less and less surprised by this as time goes on, because like one of the things Joe Biden has been consistently good on pretty much throughout his entire career in the Senate is labor rights. And I think he's planning to make this like a part of his legacy.
Okay. Okay.
It's going to be an important part of his image when he steps down. He's going to be like the union guy president.
Okay.
Uh, that's
Okay.
the feeling I get, at least.
Oh, I think that's a very good comment. The whole thing about 100 days. What do you think of Biden? Let's, since we're approaching the end of our hour, we can let that stand. I think that's a very. I hadn't thought of it, but that's a very interesting take on Biden. And then based on what you read from the White House, the official statement. And yeah, no, I think you're right. So we'll see. We're thinking in terms like everything's gonna be over by midterms, and if he doesn't get anything through, then it's going to be, game over. But maybe that's not the case. So that's really interesting. And if we'll see what the situation is in the Senate and so forth. Um, and maybe I think it would be very good, yeah, if he made a big push for labor rights. So that speaks to positive qualities of Biden. The other thing about China, I think, is illustrative because, I mean, he's also argued this as being, he's trying to put America back on the world stage, and we've seen this in all these different contexts. And he realizes that America is not going to be well, it's not going to be dominant again, but he wants it to be dominant again. And the only way to do that is actually to build up the American economy. And the only way to do that is actually to pass this whole infrastructure thing. So we say, stupid Republicans, you're holding us back. That's right. So it's important for foreign policy. And maybe you can even use that to get some Republicans on board. We're being tough on China. We need this. We have to have this research and development, especially because the Chinese are just walking all over us. And Republicans don't think the government should invest in research and development. Well, you better start doing it now, like in the '60s and the space program and everything else. So yeah.
I just have to interrupt you and just say that the basically word for word exact thing you just said about research and development in
Uh,
China and the space race, that's in the presentation, the official presentation, like almost word for word. So
I've been found out.
yeah.
Joe calls me every once in a while and we talk about things. And I
Oh,
had no idea that it was going to go that. Oh, that's very interesting. Well, thank you. Uh, good. Maybe I should end there. But now the thing about Biden, I mean, it irritates me that he doesn't take more of a fight. But as you say, now he's not transformational like FDR, but maybe, I mean, he can't be. I mean, he's also Biden, but maybe he can make substantial changes without being FDR, who was much more aggressive and said, you don't vote, or somebody like Lyndon Johnson, who also had a lifetime in Congress, the House, and then the Senate. But he knew how to get people to do what he wanted. He would force
oh yeah.
people. Biden doesn't do that. And that sometimes irritates me, but maybe in some way being favorable. He's playing more of a long game. He is a different type of president, but maybe that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not in favor of labor rights and he's not in favor of promoting the American economy. On the contrary. And like any president, we'll see what happens. But I find myself changing my mind about Biden every 5 minutes. Sometimes, I mean, totally irritated. The media coverage, greatest thing since sliced bread and all the rest of it, and then. And then him not really, defending things like $15 an hour and so forth. But no, I think you have a more a better, I would say objective, but a more intelligible interpretation of what he's doing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I don't know if I agree. My take on Biden is basically the same as yours.
But
It's
you still come up with
I'm gonna stand by my statement from the top of the show. Joe Biden is a land of contrasts.
well, maybe it's,
I, he's he's much worse on foreign policy than I assumed he
yeah,
was going to be,
yeah,
and at the same time, he's a million times better on other issues, like
right,
some issues at least.
right,
So it's like on the whole, I'm I'm pleasantly surprised
mm,
by most of the stuff I've seen so far.
yeah,
He's much better than I expected,
mm,
but there are some real problems at the same time, I think.
yeah,
Uh, and it's hard to like really get a handle on what is
exactly,
what he's actually about,
yeah.
aside from like the image stuff.
Uh,
Like,
it is. I know, okay, it's 100 days, but no, I mean, compared to other presidents, I mean, Trump from day one, this, from the inauguration, this is very scary. You knew what he was doing. Obama knew what he wanted to do, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, everybody. But no, Biden is a bit, as you say, maybe it's difficult to figure him out. So maybe it's not
yeah,
so strange that people sort of go back and forth in their estimation from being totally, fed up with what he's doing with, hmm, not bad. So we have ample opportunities to come back to that. But we should deal with foreign policy more. Well, we deal with Afghanistan, but more with foreign policy because lots of interesting things taking place there. And
yeah,
yeah, I'm surprised in a, in a bad way about that as well. But more surprised, like you say, in a good way about the domestic things. So we'll see what happens.
yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
So should we end on that quasi-optimistic note or a note
Yeah,
of caution? But there's so much more, and that's the thing about American politics. There's never a clear beginning and end, but everything is entirely in flux. So who knows what things will be like by the end of the summer when it becomes crunch time in the Senate. We'll see what happens.
yeah. Maybe next time you and I will both be like really angry.
I wasn't. I mean, when I emailed you the other day, because I had seen his thing on the digital thing about the environment, and 50%. That was a basic minimum to get back to the Paris deal. But he's,
Yeah,
I'm great, and that okay. But again, one can't really be that upset about a politician that sort of grandstands. But it's just that sometimes you like something a little bit more behind it, as it
yeah.
were. So we'll see what we talk about next time. And the foreign policy, of course, is very interesting, especially recent pronouncement on Cuba. But also you have something called the State of the Union address, which will be made, and Biden gets to give a speech again. Uh, so we'll see what that's like. But we'll
Yeah,
see what happens. But there's plenty of things to talk about. So thank you, Anders, for giving us all the information on the infrastructure bill, and thanks people for watching. Hope you uh, appreciate the video or got something out of it. And we plan to be back next week and talk about other important and exciting topics. So thanks, Anders, and we'll say
thank you.
goodbye and goodbye to everyone. And I'm going to stop recording.